Live tonight for the virtual Sonoma Raceway, LSR TV is happy to say good evening, sim racing fans, and welcome to our continuing coverage of the 2019 Full Throttle Real Sim Racing Cup Series, powered by Sim Racers for Mental Health, where tonight we think outside the oval from Sonoma, California. We go road course racing to kick off another couple of weeks of sim racing action right here at your home for sim racing and the iRacing Sports Network. As always, myself, Evan Pasoko, Justin Prince with you. Our director, Brett Wheeler, is downstairs twisting, tweaking the dials and bringing us to you this evening. And Justin, coming off of one of the more incredible finishes we've seen this season, photo finish at Michigan 2 weeks ago, into a completely different beast tonight when we run the full circuit out in Sonoma.
Yes, it's a completely different beast, to say the very least, when it comes to the comparison. But it's not just a different beast in compared to the two different tracks, but it's a different layout. That is such a different beast. The carousel adds a whole new passing zone to this racetrack into turn number 7. Adds a lot more finesse needed to make sure you get through the gears and try and stay off the grass and go off the racetrack. It's going to be a tricky one, and we've already seen a lot of that trickiness for the drivers in warm-up and qualifying to make sure they hit those marks just right.
And of course, it is a new challenge. For the longest time since Sonoma has been on the iRacing service, it has been with that short chute. So the carousel going to be, I think, one of the bigger talking points tonight, just because it's new. But let's not let that take away, with 1 minute left in the qualifying session, Justin, just how unique this racetrack is everywhere else. Of course, the big uphill section, turns 1 and 2. The back straightaway section, or turns 7 all the way through 10, down through the S's. Of course, the hairpin in turn 11. It is a very fun road course. And when it comes to stock car racing, a very unforgiving road course as well. We've been watching drivers struggle all practice and all qualifying long to keep it on the racetrack. There's not a lot of runoff areas here, so you overstep a corner, you're going to be out in the grass, and that probably isn't going to end very well.
Yes, it can really outbalance the race car. And on top of that, you mentioned with the elevation changes, 160 feet in total of elevation changes are on this racetrack for the drivers to try and deal with. There are tons and tons of danger zones on top of that, where there are chances where if you end up over-braking or under-braking one corner, you go off into the grass and it could potentially end off your day depending on where you do it on the racetrack. It's a very punching track where you can't afford to make mistakes, and it's the question of who's going to make the least amount of mistakes today to get to victory lane.
And we look forward to the action with all of you joining us tonight. 55 laps on tap for this race. Means we'll go racing just a smidge under 140 miles start to finish. The qualifying session has drawn to a close, so let's go trackside and take a look at tonight's LSR TV starting grid. 23 drivers set to take on the road course race for the first time this season. It is Dylan Jones, pole position for the driver of the 03 machine. He will best the ball by 0.2 of a second and start on the front row. Ahead of runner-up from last week, the number 88 of Andrew Freitas will start in second position. Connor Horde was one of the drivers who was very good practice earlier. He'll end up inside of row 2 and 3rd. Kyle Camber to his right-hand side starting P4 this evening, with Scott McClendon in the 51 car rounding out your top 5.
Rhett McBride starts off 6th today, but in row number 4, it's Skylar Shackelford side by side with Daniel E. Eberhardt for 7th and 8th positions. Jeremy Miller will start off in 9th, and the first driver in the 135-second bracket is Thomas J. George.
Continuing on through the final set of 5 that were able to get a time down in that 10-minute qualifying session. 11th for Shane Parrish and Anthony Fredericks in 12th. Jeremy Baysmore gets 13th spot. Brad Bohr gets 14th, and it is Sean Kalist in 15th position. Those are the final drivers to take a time. Everybody else based on provisionals.
Yes, indeed, those drivers include Jonathan Cadell in 16th position, Brian Chambliss, along with Eric Stanford, Matt Miller, Jeremy Redenberg, Blake O'Connell, and Todd Novosad. 22 drivers will take the green flag today here for this 12-turn road course 7, a long one to 2.53 miles. Same distance, in fact, as the NIS race. It's going to be interesting to see how the drivers not just try and make passes, but how they handle the strategy today to decide when am I going to pit, how much am I going to attack before then, and take it from there.
There are 10 races left if you include this evening until the start of the playoffs. So 10 more opportunities to either get into the top 16 in points or to take a hike, because it is not meant to be. And it'll be a big stepping stone in the right direction for some of the road course ringers tonight. For others, maybe just hoping to get through this one with minimum damage. We'll walk you through the track as we take a pace lap around the drivers. Right now, the right-hander, that is turn 2, the uphill section. We'll then go down a little bit of a ravine here up to the left-hander. This is turn 3. The right here is going to be turn 3A, and a much shorter run now down the hill, Justin, because we're no longer going all the way down to 4A, where that short chute would be. Here's the part where they'll duck down to the inside of the racetrack, turn 4 and turn 5.
Yes, some drivers might take that section going into the carousel area. You're in first or second gear, depending on comfort. Then usually go to second or third right here, then start hitting the brakes before they hit the crest of the hill, before working their way down the carousel. It's basically a section of the racetrack where a lot of drivers will have to let their cars roll down. Some may shift off to second or stay in third and use as much of the rumble strip on the right side of the track as they can before launching their way into one of the best passing zones of the day, turn number 7, a hard braking zone where you go from third to first gear.
And it is a very wide right-hander. As you see, they come down here at the end of the drag strip. That is 7, but you got to go wide because you got to get back onto the curbs for what is 7A. And this is a very fast downhill section, a left, then a right, a left, then a right, all the way down till you get to turn 10. So this is a difficult position on the racetrack to make a pass. Doesn't mean that drivers aren't going to try to do it, but certainly this is a point where momentum's going to be very critical, and that's why, as you mentioned, turn 7 is very important. Because if you don't set yourself up good for this section, it's a long way down to the hairpin turn 11, the second last corner on the racetrack. That may be the best one as they play check and to see who can get latest onto the brakes.
And you mentioned there being turn 7 being important to set things up. It's important, especially out of turn 10, to set your run up for that hairpin, because if you don't get a strong run, there's a chance you'll get a dive bomb to your right side quarter panel into the corner. I believe it's time to get racing here in wine country, Evan.
Race cars off and away. We get set to get twisty. It's the first road course race of 2019. Let's go racing from Sonoma. Green flag in the air. Dylan Jones leads the first time as we go up the hill. The 03 car clear into turn 1. And look at the 24 Connor Horn. Takes away second from Farinars. Contact into the back end, but Horn gets the spot.
It wasn't a good start, actually, for Freenash on that outside line. Ended up having a slow entry up the hill and a late break that time. Avoided damage, however. Still in the third position as the drivers get into rhythm. Well, Eberhardt, along with the number 18 of Parrish, both overran turn 4.
And this is going to continue on. This is your best opportunity to make the passes now. Of course, no caution flags over the course of this race. A battle for the race lead now. It's the inside of the carousel at turn 6. The 24 Connor Horn got up on the inside of Dylan Jones, has the position. Now into turn 7. It is now the pole sitter Jones in second position. He is trailed by third place right now for Renars. McClendon 4, Kamer 5. First time we snake through the S's.
And I was saying this just before the race, Horn might be one of the favorites today, and if he can get some good laps together, could be his race to lose because he's been a strong road course driver. Trouble though for second.
Yeah, he got off. That was turn 10. We talked about the limit there on the track. Not a lot of room to give, and Jones felt a battle up on the inside as Ferdinand drove it in on him. He got sideways, and he lost a handful of positions. Not only does he give up P2, McClendon also snakes through. Kyle Kamer gets on by. Jones is going to be able to hold off McBride, really cut it tight that time up into turn number 1, but that is going to shuffle things up. Not a good opening lap for your pole sitter Dylan Jones, who I think would have preferred to just get out and run away. Now he's working at a 2+ second deficit to the top spot.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's hard to try and pull away, especially in the early going is a huge shot for McBride.
And that 5 car has been really trying to get in there, and he got contact for the back end. It was Daniel Eberhardt who initiated that contact, got into him. It actually going to cost Eberhardt more because he went off and into the grass a little bit. Almost, I wonder if there was a sleep at the wheel there, thinking that they had a lot further ways to go, but Eberhardt really hard onto the brakes. That was turn 4, got into him, and a crazy opening lap and a half as these drivers try to find themselves a little bit of real estate.
It wasn't the fact he didn't get on the brakes, or it was the fact he got on them not early enough, it looked like. Carried at least a 20-mile-per-hour difference. And there's some differences you can have on the brake bias based on comfortability. Some drivers prefer towards the front. It looks like Eberhardt might have been one of those that wanted to try and charge the corners, but both times in that same section, he's overran the corner entry and lost spots.
And now the 48 car, Brad Bohr, the next driver, he also goes off track, and again, that was turn 10. Same place we saw the issue for the top 5 guys last lap. He got onto the curbs too much, was off and into the grass, and he will give up a position to Thomas J. George. So George cracks the top 10, coming off of a top 3 podium result from MIS a week ago. The Milwaukee Tools Chevrolet back to where he started in that number 10 position. Your top 2 are starting to pull away with this one. It is still Connor Horn atop of Andrew Friedage, first and second, but it is 2 seconds, therefore back to McClendon third and company. We'll see of these top 2 if they're going to be able to stay lockstep with each other, or if one of them's got a clear advantage. Everybody's sliding. Look at the 24 and the 88. Both cars way stepped out that time in turn 6.
And that was an interesting way to enter the carousel. I think Horn got a late break. He did the same kind of bobble when he tried to pass on the first lap. And Freenos just kind of followed him on the same line and just lost it the same way. That loses them both about a tenth or two. However, they're lucky to keep the car safe. The thing is, though, this track temp is blistering hot, Evan. 125 degrees Fahrenheit, right towards the very tip of the high end, rather, I should say, of what you see on this iRacing service.
And also, the thing you got to keep in mind, again, just with these cars in general, they're not necessarily made to drive at a road course like this. As we watch this battle for the race lead continue, and Friedage now within a car length of Horn that time at 11. Wanted a challenge, unable to make it stick in one of those throwback paint schemes on board the 88 this week. But, I mean, these cars are already difficult enough to handle. You got to be very gentle on the throttle. It's not hard on and hard off at any point. Those hot track conditions, as you mentioned, only going to make it that much more difficult, and it is very much driver versus track. Moreover, compared to driver versus driver, which we've seen everywhere else with that new rules package, keeping most cars on top of each other when we're oval racing.
And I'm glad you brought up the fact it's hard to drive a stock car, of course, on a road course, because it's much more slipperier, a heavier build of a car. It's hard to try and maintain traction. In fact, if you're, say, a road course driver that is used to how those cars handle, and I had a teammate that did this, full disclosure, with one sim in motorsports, their first reaction was, how in the world do you guys do this? And basically struggle to even put the comparable times to what we're seeing for the race leaders in his first 10, 20, 30 laps around Sonoma.
And that's why you do have drivers who tend to be a little bit better in the road course discipline than others. Of course, if it's a NASCAR league, you have an oval license, and for those familiar with how the iRacing service works, you might not do a ton of road. There are some drivers who do participate in road more frequently or just enjoy it a little bit more than others, and this is their opportunity to shine and really show what they can bring to the table. 22 cars started this race. Jeremy E. Miller, the only driver off of the lead lap, just that he came down to pit road after that opening lap. So aside from that, relatively big incident-free throughout the rest of the field, aside from a couple of cars off here and there. Already 5 laps working into the 55 on the board.
Yeah, for Miller, I think he just had damage on the right side and potentially brought the meatball flag, had to get repaired, already back on the track 2 laps down. But other than that, it's been fairly clean. Most of the drivers have been able to keep it on the track fairly stably. But the thing is, once the tires start wearing out, especially with the setup, a fixed setup, mind you, it can get really slick on corner entry, and when you're trying to downshift and go into the brakes sometimes at the same time, and that could potentially cause a lot of mistakes, especially in the next couple laps or so on this racetrack.
And we'll see as these tires begin to fall off who can get into a rhythm maybe more so than others. There's a handful of battles throughout the racetrack that you've been taking a peek at as the battle for the race lead has stayed somewhat consistent at about a 2-3 car length difference. Friedrich is able to get close into the corner, which is exactly what you would expect, of course, completing the pass. The more difficult part. Battle for 7th is on, and Skylar Shackelford is going to give up 2 spots in the 12 car. We had just been looking at this group, and the 12 car kind of looked like he let the 18 and the 20 go. He was in a very bad position, Justin, we said right off of the start. Battling into the S is not a great idea, and you saw that unfold with the 12 car just kind of backing out, letting Parrish and Eberhardt get on through.
I think that was just trying to use a bit of racecraft, knowing these drivers are already having a faster pace as the tires start to wear out. Plus, Shackelford, as you've seen, overran turn number 7 and opened up that bottom side. Sometimes you can try and shove them off the racing line, so to speak, force them to check up, but Shackelford going with the smarter thing of letting them on go, trying to run his own race and focus on his strategy, because you don't want to fight too hard early on with how this track is, because if you do, you're going to end up burning up your equipment and your stuff too early, and it could potentially lose a ton of time.
We'll see if this does play out. Long-run game for Skylar Shackelford, somebody who has had a impressive 2019 debut campaign in this Full Throttle RealSimRacing Cup Series. He's watched the battle continue in front of him. Parrish trying to hold off Eberhardt to the inside, and there's another spot gained for the 90. On the inside at the bottom of the hill in 6, he's able to hook it up, get on through. So Eberhardt now at a race high P7. Parrish loses a spot, but that 18 Ford Mustang still up from where he started, so in a good position.
Yeah, he's in a decent position right now, I think, but for Shackelford, it might not be the best position, but for the race lead, it's side by side to the hairpin.
And here is the group that we've been watching, the 24 a horn outside again, able to just get back and onto the throttle as Andrew Friedrich continues to hound him up front. They've opened up now a 3-second advantage over Still, McClendon 3rd, Kamer 4th, and Dylan Jones in the number 5 spot. That 88 car, Justin, I don't know if he's considerably faster, but the number of opportunities he's gotten leads me to believe that if the 88 can get by, he might be able to do something with it. To the bumper that time. Now to the inside of the carousel. Does he try to hook it up? Remember, both cars have been very loose on this part of the racetrack now as they go up a hill and now dive back down in. He's looking to the inside. It's not going to happen this time. The Speedway Chevrolet stays in front.
Yeah, and for Horn, he's been fighting hard. They've been actually trading the fastest lap time so far in the race today, but Friedrich has the fastest overall by 0.4 of a second. So at this point, I think Friedrich knows a little bit that we see him do this where he might toy around a little bit, be patient, try and force the driver front to burn out their equipment, then be able to pass them and take off knowing that they might not be able to keep up. We've seen it on ovals. Looks like Friedrich might be trying the same thing today and just trying to follow the pace in the tire lines as Connor Horn.
One funny that we talk about all the differences, you know, road versus oval, the challenges, the the drivers who can benefit and the drivers who may be on the the opposite end of the spectrum, and then at the same time, the same strategy comes in play. You got to take care of your race car. None of that changes. You got to pace yourself over the course of again, but it is a non-stop race, 55 laps through, top to bottom, out here in Northern California, where it is very hot, dry, and that also plays into effect on the strategy and how these cars are driving. And Only 8 laps in. I think these drivers may have an idea of what their cars have got, but I'm thinking we're going to have a great fight for first and second, and even third and fourth. A big slide. McClendon in third. The 51 car way sideways as he dove down out of turn 4. The 8 car came to the inside. This is side by side for third. McClendon's got the better spot, so he should be able to hold him off, and he does. But Justin, I was just about to say, these guys have been pretty close. Was waiting for the fight, and here it is, as the 8 car is not done yet.
I think we've seen Kyle Kamer actually be, at one point, the fastest driver in qualifying, and he was the 4th quickest in practice, the driver that was closest to him in that grouping. Well, Jones, who's falling back, but McClendon in 3rd position, so they have even pace. And Kamer, I think at this point, trying to force McClendon into a mistake. He tried to diamond off the corner through the carousel, which you can get a run out of, but it's the matter of, can he get the job done before he overdrives his equipment? Because I don't think the patience is going to last much longer by being behind McClendon as much as he has. Side by side again for the lead, however.
It was Freenars back to the inside in 11, and once more, Connor Horn slices at a 12 and stays in front. 2nd lap in a row that Andrew Freenars made that dive down. Remember, we talked about the game of chicken on the brakes. Well, he was getting on the brakes harder and making the inside work, so kudos to him. But I think Connor Horn, honestly, Justin, wasn't all that concerned. I think he trusted that Freenars wasn't just going to wipe him out.
Pardon me, Cadell just spun out of the middle of the hairpin corner.
That's the 69 machine. He was all on his own, too hard on the brakes. And luckily enough, everybody saw that one coming. He almost backed up, and the Brad Bohr gets it corrected pretty quickly. He'll fall now, as he was running in 13th position at the time.
Yeah, and it's so easy to do at this racetrack to lock up the brakes and end up losing control in the middle of the hairpin. And in that case, Cadell was the first one to do it today, but we just had a change for P number 3. Kamer able to take the pass into the carousel. However, he just overdrove 7.
And there's that double apex that we talked about, and McClendon's got an opportunity side by side now down to the yeses, and the 51's going to back out of it, knowing full well with 46 laps to go in this race, that is not the move to make at this time. And credit Kyle Kamer for pounding the rock and getting back after it, fighting for that position. He'll rocket out of turn 11 with a good run. Now looking for a little bit of separation between he and, at the time, 3rd place runner, now P4, Scott McClendon.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the practice times, comparing the two drivers that we are seeing battling on this racetrack. The bigger fall-off between the two of them was McClendon. Kamer was able to save his tires much more compared to the 51. So now it's the matter of, can he pull away, because he's running just about a second off of 2nd place. So there's a chance he can try and pull away and try and get a big-time gap before some pit stops come in this 3rd position.
And of course, when we talk about the strategy, 55-lap race in distance, and a very similar story to what we saw here on the iRacing Sports Network just a couple of weeks back with the IRASCAR Pigueta Freeze iRacing series and what the call is going to be. 2-stop is probably the direction drivers are leaning in. You could stretch it to 1 if you're crazy, but don't be shocked if those pit stops come at a range of 15 to 20 laps in, at least for the first cycle.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see the fastest drivers, maybe the top half of the field, in fact, go for the 2-stop, because drivers, if they attempt the 1-stop, the fall-off in the final few laps of the tires goes an extra 2 seconds a lap. So it's a big-time gamble, even if you're not on the quickest pace to try and attempt it, because you can make it up to about 28 laps on the fuel if you save. But the 2-stop is the best way to go if you have the pace to do so, to be able to get the most positions on the racetrack.
Just running through the field here, that issue that you mentioned, with Cadell. Cadell was able to get that spot back from Brad Bohr. Bohr made a mistake just a couple of corners later, so Cadell's now actually back up into P12. Brad Bohr sits in 13th. Oh, and he's around. The 48 is into the tires. Just as we started talking about him, Justin, it actually picked it back up, was all over the back of the 69, and down to the S's. Got a little bit too much of the curb, and again, very little runoff, and that is a lot of front-end damage.
Yeah, I think he bounced it back down on the suspension and just hooked it straight left because of how much it bounced off the rumble strips, and he was just along for the ride from there on out. Unfortunate for Brad Bohr, He now has no front clip, and he's now struggling with grip on the race car. Wouldn't be surprised if he ducked on it eventually. But no, he's going to try and chug it out even with the damage.
I feel like he wants to get a little bit more out of this and at least get himself closer to the fuel window so that it doesn't disturb him as much. But, I mean, you said it. We could see it when we picked it up right after he got into the wall. The whole front end of that 48 Chevrolet is gone. And it is going to make a night that had been a little bit rough that much worse. He falls to 18th on the scoring pile right now. Only 4 drivers behind him overall in the grand scheme of things. The top 2, though, continue to fight as we scan through the field and keep you posted on what's going on everywhere. Of course, for running order going across at the top of your screen. But Freitage is still there on Connor Horn. That has not changed. It is still 2-3 car lengths here or there. Those cars fighting. What has changed, Justin, is their advantage over third on back. 8 seconds to Kamer in third, who's still atop McClendon and is starting to stretch out between he and the 51 after he made that pass a couple of laps ago.
Did we go back to 1991 or something? Because that's something comparable to Ricky Rudd, Davey Allison's battle here on the carousel back then, but these two have been the top of the class so far. Their pace has actually started to drop off compared to 3rd, 4th, and 5th. However, their short run pace was so good and so on point, really, even with how loose they were in the carousel, that no one's been able to even touch them right now. As long as they don't overdrive themselves, they might be able to keep up this gap as long as you're not free-nush like you just did there. I think this is still a decent pace for them to keep on going.
Another good battle, Rhett McBride, Daniel Lee Eberhardt. We have taken a few looks at this one for 6th and 7th position. McBride had one of the more interesting opening laps of the race, the Riverwatch Chevrolet, with some front-end damage, with some pretty significant back-end damage. Eberhardt has been trying to chase him down, as these two have duked it out for some time. They're now far end at the bottom of the drag strip, turn 7, now 7A, and they head off to the S's. Don't count the 90 car out on somebody who's going to be aggressive and willing to fight. Still getting used to, by the way, Justin, seeing those brand new 2019 Ford Mustangs on track. They look great, and one of them is that 90 car. He's a part of this battle for 6th and 7th position. Tad bit of lap traffic ahead of him. It's Todd Novosad in the 34. He'll dive out of the way, give him some space.
Yeah, and this is where the traffic's going to come into play, because we've seen it in real life as well. If you reach the traffic in a passing zone, great. They'll end up giving you the space if they allow to with the blue flags. However, and this is the concern for some drivers potentially, if they reach them, say, towards the danger zones or where you have to run the single file, you can lose as much as half a second, a full second even, depending on how long you're stuck behind them. So it's going to be tricky to try and get by traffic. The best place is to let them on by, to run towards turn 4 to get into the carousel, the mid portion of the S's, as well as the passing zones, of course, of 7 and turn 11.
And just updating you, so Novosad, we saw him get out of the way. He just fell a lap down. Miller is 2 laps down in 22nd position. Everybody else still in this. You got guys like Jeremy Rittenberg, who I think has just gone a lap down. He's moving out of the way, giving space to your race leaders. There are points on this racetrack where it can get a little bit tight. It's not as simple as on an oval. If the fast lane's on the bottom, moving up high and getting out of the way, so it takes a lot of constant communication. Drivers really need to focus on not only not wrecking their race car, but being very aware of who's around them, especially if faster cars, race leaders, and other cars in battles are coming up close on them. So good to see that all of these drivers giving each other space and being smart about this race, which in the grand scheme of things is relatively short. Maybe just about an hour and a half run time between the green flag and the checkered flag. But again, without those breaks, the caution flags, no time to kind of stretch your fingers out, have a sip of water, and kind of relax for a moment. You're up on the wheel. It can feel like a marathon at times, especially if you just so happen to be one of the drivers who's more busy than some others that white knuckle all night.
Yeah, I have to say, I ran this race myself twice, in fact, with brake issues, mind you, with my said pedals. It was probably the most nerve-wracking race I have taken part in all of iRacing, to try and complete all 55 laps while making sure you don't go over the incident limit for the official races, while making sure you don't destroy your car or any other people's cars. That pressure can also build, of course, to tonight's action because it's, again, you have to make sure you don't let up in some cases to be able to keep up with the drivers in front to have position, but at times you have to be able to pace yourself and know where's the smartest decisions. It's kind of that marathon of, okay, I got to sprint at the beginning, try and pace myself on forward, then sprint once again before entering the pit lane. But take a look at that battle for fourth position because McClendon's been reeled in by Jones, and Jones nearly gave him a love tap at through 7.
And Jones is somebody else who, you expect to be one of the guys contending, and he's trying to get around the 51 machine here in this fight for 4th and 5th. I'm surprised that Jones kind of got stuck back here in P5 again. He was your pole sitter, fell back to P5. He wants to get at least one of them back at a defensive line now as McClendon takes the inside away, tries to make Jones do it the hard way. They're both on the throttle, and I think the 51 is going to hold him off. Yes, he does. Great driving by both of those cars, and McClendon's decision to take the inside away pays dividends, but I would have thought Dylan Jones would have recovered a little bit quicker from that mistake, and they're going after it. Takes a swipe to the bumper that time up in turn 2.
And I've noticed this actually for all the teammates here for ages, that they've all seemed to have their much more later braking zones and much more harder on said brakes to try and carry more speed, and there's one of the results right there of doing that.
Turns him around. Dylan Jones got up and into the back of McClendon. He sent the 51 around, and Scott McClendon was stuck. He actually comes back out onto the track in front of the 18 machine. I'm sure much to the dismay of Shane Parrish, who's going to go to the inside and try to get around him. There is no 5-second penalties for that in the Full Throttle RealSimRacing Cup Series. McClendon gets back on track. It'll cost him 3 spots, and that could be big as Dylan Jones, I think, got tired of waiting around, and I was just complimenting him on being very sportsmanlike. In turn 11, it ended very quickly.
I think it wasn't even the fact that he was getting frustrated. Again, we've seen this with Danny Everhart especially. The Aegis cars, I don't know if this is how they set the brake bias or where they practice their braking markers, or about maybe 5-10 feet later than a lot of the drivers they've been battling along with in this later part of the top 10. We've seen it a lot with Everhart where he overran turn number 4, and it looked like Jones that time didn't go as deep as Everhart's been going, and ended up just, I think, mistiming it. But we also see Kyle Kamer now in the pit lane.
But interesting move here as Kamer decides to hit pit road. It is in that window that I mentioned, 15 to 20 laps or so, maybe early in the window. But the 8 car has come down to the pit lane. He was last scored, of course, in 3rd position. He is going to get his 4 tires and fuel, get back out onto the racetrack, and maybe a little bit of a short pit play by the 8 car to try to make up some of the gap to your race leaders, as that kind of solidifies our inference that it is going to be a 2-stop night for the cars up front.
Yeah, I think if you see some of the drivers in the back half, they might try and stretch it to 1, as I was referring to a little bit, to try and gain some kind of track position in some points, especially with how tight it is to get inside the top 16 right now. But again, the best strategy, take 4 tires at about 20 at lap 20, lap 40. In fact, we might see drivers go again earlier on that, like that when we've seen Kamer. The window is open. It's the question of who else goes in for the 2-stop.
We'll see if other drivers are going to react to that decision. Your race leader, Connor Horn, does not come down to the pit lane. Neither does Andrew Freitage in second, who finds himself at about a 2-second deficit. I think for the first time tonight, that's probably the biggest gap we've seen between first and second up to this point. Now 17 laps into the race, Dylan Jones in 3rd, Daniel Eberhardt in 4th. All those drivers still deciding not to come down to the pit lane. It is not worth it quite yet at this point. So I think they maybe wait a little bit longer towards lap 18, 19 or so. There's no advantage to staying out. It's not like you're going to, stay out, maybe catch a yellow. It's just not a thing at road courses. One of those small strategical differences between maybe how you would make a decision on an oval versus how you would make that decision at a race like this. I do believe they'll be in very shortly. I was surprised Freitage didn't come in in, given that I think he's starting to notice, Josh, that he's losing some time. Thought he might have dove down to the pit lane to, try to kind of head that off and to get himself onto the pit lane on fresh tires sooner. Maybe it'll happen this time, but if Horn gets tires first and or at the same time, Freenar's life is that much more difficult. If he can kind of undercut him, get in some clean air, maybe the 88 can do something, because I think he was actually a tad bit better on that short run, aside from obviously that first lap where Horn blew through everybody. But I mean, the 88 was hounding him a lot more so in the first 10 laps that he has since then.
Well, the thing is, in the last time by through the S's, that's where he lost the 2 seconds, but I think he's actually still a little bit faster than Connor Horn because he gained 3/4 tenths of it right back. So at this point, I think the strategy for him is he doesn't want to give Horn the upper hand, give him the chance of the fresher tires. So Freenach, knowing this is right before the window, is closing back on in, trying to push in now and see if he can gain right back up to Horn before he has to duck down. He just gained another half a second on back. So there goes the worry right there. They're going to have to, however, have a driver who just pit in, Anthony Fredericks, in front.
Fredericks drops down, and he will get his service as the top 2 cars continue to run out and onto the racetrack. Daniel Eberhardt, the Donnie machine, also now coming around, and he will get his service, no doubt, for 4 tires and fuel. Then on to Thomas J. George coming down to pit road. Here is that big influx of cars, relatively when we thought it would happen. And, your top 2 are way out. About a country mile, I'd say, ahead of everybody else. Of course, that'll kind of correct itself once they pit. Kamer, who has also been down to the pit lane, we mentioned he kicked off the strategy in 3rd. Currently running in P9 amongst the couple of cars who have yet to pit, so he'll make quick work of these guys if he can get by him. Dive to the inside, he'll shackle forward now. Watch the leaders go down through the S's. Let's see if Connor Horn's hitting the box.
The pace difference right now between Kamer and as well as the leaders is 2+ seconds gained each lap back on them. Now it's the question of, does Horn come in and does Freenach try and follow him? 18 laps right now. Looks like he's going to keep on pushing for now, but it looks like Freenach deciding, I had enough. He's going to take his tires now.
And I like that decision by the 88 machine. He had started to catch back into the 24 car. I think that had maybe found a little bit extra, made up for a bad lap or two. He's going to get fresh tires, and, this is the point where we look at the fall-off, Justin. Last lap for Freenach, a 1:36.3. His best lap was a 1:33.1. So there's about 2 to 3 seconds left out there for him to improve on this outlap. The difference between the two when they came to pit was just 1.2 seconds. So the undercut could rocket Freenach to the race lead. Certainly I would expect Connor Horn to respond, as he's got to probably push that 24 car hard here on this lap and then look to pit at the end of it. He's on lap 19.
Yes, indeed, and you got to factor in one more thing. Scott McClendon has actually just cycled to the provisional P1 spot because he pit a couple laps ago on lap 15. Remember that very early, some of the early short undercuts that appeared. Or am I miscalculating this? Pardon me, that was where I believe the spin was. Yes, indeed. But so far right now, it's Freenach that's in the best situation now strategy-wise. But he's still going to have to get around a lot of the drivers that are going to slow him down a little bit and potentially even things out on time.
He was able to get around McClendon, and in front of him now at the bottom of the carousel, next up would be Shane Parrish. So if those drivers can, not hold him up too much, it'll really help Freenach out. Connor Horn not into pit road. The 24 still staying out. Justin, is he pushing for a one-stopper? As this race starts to get closer to the midway point, if he is thinking about that, he'd have to get to at least lap number 28 to go to get to the halfway point for a one-stopper. That's still, he's still closer to the two-stop window than the one-stop window, but I would have thought the response would have been to follow the 88 back down into the pit lane right there.
It's too early to say if he's going to go for the one stop. If he stays out, say, past lap 23, I think that's where we might factor that in. But for Horn right now, the way it's looking, I think he's just thinking he's feeling more comfortable right now on this racetrack and trying to see if he can have fresher tires to then pull back away from Freenach if he can try and pass him after his pit window. That, in my opinion, is trying to be that difference because we've seen, yes, you can lose a ton of time on the racetrack, Evan, like we've seen in real life. Mark Truex Jr., Kyle Busch. However, you can gain a ton of it back compared to the drivers who pit earlier in that race on newer tires towards the end of a run.
That's certainly the case, and we're going to get a better sample size here. Connor Horn's also got traffic of his own. Anthony Fredericks just ahead of him, 15th position, is the last car on the lead lap at the moment as Horn heads down to the S's, and we'll get an updated look at what his lap time is. Freenars' last lap you could throw out, it was a 1:54, because obviously that includes his pit time. Horn stays out again, though, so the 24, enjoying the relatively clean air, wants to run this one through. The lap time for the Speedway Chevrolet up front at this time, it was 1:37.2 last time, a 1:37.0 there. So he's showing he's still got a little bit to play with and to not count him out. But let's watch the lap time here adjusted as Freenars heads to 11 to see how much time the 88's making up with fresh tires.
Yeah, I can see him going all the way down to, it appears actually down to first gear, up to second, then up to third gear before you get to this little dogleg before the stripe. This time by for time, however, 1:33.366,
wow.
His second fastest time of the race.
That's 3.5 seconds of difference right there. So if Connor Horn would have pit now, he would be behind Freenars. That's the benefit of the undercut. Now, of course, there's the flip side, and these drivers have spotters and crew chiefs and teams, and they, kind of focus group this info, would test it over the week, and they know Freenars is eventually, when Horn pits, Freenars is going to be slower at the end of the run. And somewhere in that middle between balancing better early but not that much worse late, there's an equilibrium. It balances out at some point, and you got to have faith if you're Connor Horn that you guys have got that figured out. He has had a very good 2019 campaign, a better campaign than maybe some of the results would have suggested. Has had opportunities to win multiple races, still looking to snag that one, and tonight could very well be the case. Another lap around, though. He's now got 21 laps on the tires, and just to show you the difference in speed, check out the 69, Jonathan Cadell behind him. That's a car who is pitted with fresh tires and is now trying to find a way around the race leader, who is slow and is basically like a roadblock to him.
That was a 2-second difference last time by, actually, as Horn actually goes off road tracking, in fact, to let Cadell on by. So that's going to lose even more time. How much time has he lost, in fact, to Freenos? At least 12 seconds already in this run since he pit. A significant amount of time. On top of that, though, we've been following along with some of the battles going on, including for second. It's about to turn to a 3-car tango as Jones and McBride are trying to stretch it.
And a 1 car off right in front of this group with the race leader. It was the 48 car of Brad Bohr. He's having a couple of connection issues. He actually spun that car around after he ended up in the grass coming down and into the carousel. So the 48 went around. It doesn't affect anybody. He stays off of the racetrack, and of course there are no yellows. So it only makes his night that much more difficult, as he's kind of fighting with the Batmobile or a modified with how that race car looks. But that maybe was a quick scare for Connor Horn. The race leader came with about 5 feet of him, but was able to get through on by without issue. I think Brad saw him coming and stayed off of the racetrack till that corner was clear.
Safe thing for Brad Bohr to do to try and stay out of the situation. Don't affect the race lead if you're a lap car. That's one of the cardinal sins. If you end up doing that, you're not going to have some happy drivers. But if we can swing back to second position, you're going to see now Freenos is going to break up this battle a little bit with the fresher tires. It looks like Jones as well as McBride might be potentially thinking maybe about the one-stop strategy, because they're staying on the racetrack. Connor Horn, I think it might be safe to say, also might be trying that.
I think at this point you have to think that Connor Horn is going for the one-stopper. If it was, 2-3 laps and you do lose out, to Freenars and the other guys who've been fighting the 8, Kyle Cameron and whatnot, okay, but I think Connor Horn's far too smart of a guy to just throw away 12, 15 seconds probably now at this point and then decide to go back onto the same strategy. Now, at this point, you kind of made your bed and you got to sleep in it either way, if it works or if it does not. We didn't get an opportunity really to see how this one-stopper would have played out in that peak race a couple of weeks ago, because everybody agreed, 2 was the way to go. Connor Horn, obviously, and I feel like he's probably run a full race on this strategy, preparing, with the teammates and whatnot to prepare for this. I think he's confident in it, but at this point, he's staying out, and I think you're going to see that car down to the pit lane at lap 28. But that's really pushing it on fuel, so he's going to, make it to 28 if he's going to have a shot at pulling this one-stop strategy off.
I actually was talking a bit with some of my fellow team members and strategists about this, actually, and they said you had to save 2 laps of fuel from the start of the race. When they put in the fuel in the tank, essentially, there's only enough for 26 normal laps. However, depending on how you drive it, you can save that fuel by letting the car roll down some of the hills, etc., which you can usually naturally do depending on the pace. The thing is, though, and the reason why I'm thinking Horn is trying this gamble is, he's hoping that he'll be able to gain enough time between how much time Freenosh is going to have to spend in the pits and so forth to be able to then defend maybe for the final 5 laps or so if the 88 reels him back in on the fresh tires. It's a gigantic gamble. Huge gamble. 15 seconds is now the gap. It's been a lost amount of time of almost 20 seconds. If he can find a way to get to work, however, he's going to look like the biggest genius in the room.
Anthony Fredericks in the 4 has just taken that car to pit road. He was in a battle with Jonathan Cadell for 12th and 13th position. And I think the 4 machine, just trying to get a better look at this, the 4 car blew up. So Anthony Fredericks lost the engine. I thought that it was smoke from that car getting sideways, but no, the 4 blew up, going down it into the carousel. So he has taken that virtual tow to the pit lane, and in the blink of an eye, his night is done. This isn't really the kind of racetrack you would expect cars to be blowing up at, but maybe a combination of a lot of tape, a setup, but a car that's got front-end damage was a pressure cooker, and Fredericks now going to drop off what was a group of 13 lead lap cars. His night is done.
And he was one of the drivers actually right on the bubble to make the top 16 for the postseason coming into tonight. In fact, tied for points with Nicholas Caldwell, who is not racing this evening. This is going to hurt a little bit because Scott McClendon, who is 5 points back of that battle, he's having a strong night. There's a chance that McClendon moves up to 15th, and potentially that could shuffle Fredericks to 16th and puts pressure on him the next time the ovals come into play in terms of points.
It's really going to hurt Caldwell, as you mentioned, for not showing up. Fredericks tied for the final spot in. 5 points behind both of them is McClendon. So McClendon's in this race. You mentioned he's having a good run. It's great news for that driver. Also, somebody like, a little bit further down the line, Jeremy Rittenberg is 18th. Not a fantastic run for the 26, but hey, you're not good at road courses. You show up, you can beat 4 or 5 other cars. Somebody in front of you doesn't show up, another car wrecks out of the race. Jeremy Rittenberg could be very close to a playoff spot after this race. So that's how critical this road course race is. And that last sequence of events is the 51 car, McClendon, now hits the pit lane.
I don't think he's able to hit the fuel mark. Maybe that's the thought process here, because he's going to have to come in again as late as lap 48 if the math goes right, to about 24 laps a stint. And that's extremely late to try and get fresh tires on the race car. In and out he goes, but he's not going to lose too many spots on the racetrack and have some fresh tires. However, it's going to be interesting how he handles the second pit stop now, because there's not a great chance he even has enough fuel to make it by pitting that early for the one spot.
And assuming that is the case and he's not going to be able to make it, then that's a big blow, and his night essentially done, because, you kind of banked so much on this strategy working. You essentially put yourself back on the 2-stop strategy, but you pitted 10 laps late, and you gave away 20 to 30 seconds. That's tough, and if he wasn't able to make it, what can Connor Horn do? Because for much of this, he was racing for the lead against Andrew Friedage, who, by the way, Justin, with the fresh tires, is back in second position and only 8 seconds behind him. So Horn hasn't had ample opportunity to save fuel because he's been battling for the race lead for much of this race.
I think if you're Horn, once you get the tires, at this point, I think you got to push like crazy for the first 5 laps, because if I'm doing the math right with how much time, 40 seconds in the lane, he'll cycle him at least 30 seconds back. With the difference in time, he there's a chance he could be as much as about 3 seconds quicker than Freenosh, so he could potentially catch him at the midpoint of the run. But after that, you made your bed. I don't know how it's going to work out in terms of trying to be able to hold off the fresher tires of Freenosh at the end of this race. That's where the strategy really, I think, is going to come into play once Freenosh has to sacrifice an hour 40 seconds back to get fresh Goodyear tires on his car at around lap 40.
It is another lap out on track for Connor Horn. If he wants to split this race in half, he's going to have to make it 2 more times around as he works lap number 26 of 55 and now completes it that time through. And it'd be kind of poetic for both of these guys to end up on top of each other when Horn pits. If they're even at the halfway point, Justin, that kind of shows you that the strategies are pretty even, because you'd have half a run on the 2-stopper for Freenosh, and Horn would be coming down to the pit lane. If this is any indication, and if Connor Horn can do this, we could be setting up for both of these cars on completely different strategies to have a good chance at winning this thing, and they could very well be on top of each other in those final 5 laps.
I think so too. It's going to be an absolutely crazy one if that indeed is the case, but there's 2 things that have to come into play. 1, Horn has to have a good pit stop entry. 2, he's going to have to make sure he doesn't make any significant mistakes to lose tons of time on the racetrack. Because if he, say, makes a mistake, loses a couple seconds, that potentially brings an extra lap or 2 more of insurance for Freenosh to try and make a move work. And speaking of which, the gap is now under 5 seconds. Freenosh might be within range to make this pass in the next lap or 2. However, Horn is right at that bubble to come into pit and be able to make it on fuel.
He could come in this time. It just means he'd have to stretch it out an extra lap on the second half, and that is going to be the case. So the 24 car comes down to the pit lane with 27 laps complete. If he could go that exact same distance on fuel, he would make it to the white flag. So somewhere he'll need to be longer. There goes the 88 of Andrew Freenosh as he retakes the race lead, and the 24 car has come down pit road. The good news is, Justin, it appears that he's under power, and he's not limping to the pit lane. He's under power, so he's still got fuel. I think he might just have a shot at pulling this thing off. But again, he did 27 laps this run. He's going to have to do 28.
I think he can do it, is the thing, because that's basically the very edge 28. Realistically, he can make it on the fuel. And, hold on 1 second. I think just going to double check this, because, yes, he did take the 4 tires, but now it's a matter of keeping on going and trying to make up the time back, because the gap is 30 seconds between the drivers. If Freenosh was to pit, say at lap 40, even with the time factored in, it could be 30 seconds, the gap between them after that cycle. But Horn still has to go through the traffic.
And the good news is the 24 kind of finds himself with, I guess, minimum distractions. The problem is that when he finally gets to 2 cars, it is going to be Eric Stanford and Brad Bohr, and they're on top of each other right now, and that is an exchange for position. So we can watch this fight side by side, 13th and 14th place. The damaged Brad Bohr 48 Chevy is sticking this one through. He goes a little bit wide in 7. The 19 dives to the inside, and a well-defended run. 48 stays in front. So because these cars are for position, Connor Horn's catching it pretty quickly, Justin. They're going to be very much less inclined to get out of his way. The 19 machine, though, great sportsmanship there, lets him go. Brad Bohr also pulls over, and he's going to lose a little bit of time. That move costs the 48 a spot, but both of those drivers in the heat of the moment let that guy go. That was great to see.
Yeah, I think they both knew, of course, that he's had the natural pace Horn has all night long. We've seen him in multiple different road course series trying to build his skill set, such as in the V8 Super Truck Series World Championship, to try and develop that side of things for his race team. And it's coming into play tonight. Now it's the matter of, can he catch up the next cars for position? Dylan Jones is the next one to do so. Horn has closed up, by the way, 2 seconds just about this last time by with a 1:55 after getting out of the lane.
And now he has his challenge set out in front of him, and, you know, these times are all just relatively subjective, but Connor Horn is, as you mentioned, about 30 seconds off of Freitas, and that 88's pit stop number coming up shortly. He's about 10 laps or so away from having, maybe even a little bit less than 10 laps from having to come down to the pit lane. I don't think Connor Horn's going to catch him before then. But this thing's setting up to be a real good finish, and let's not also forget the other players in this conversation, Justin. Of course, we talk about all of the guys up front, but there's a lot more drivers in this than just those two, and as we cross the halfway point in this race, let's take a look top to bottom at your Ford Entertainment Group.
Hold on 1 second. Andrew Freenos just wrecked. The leader just wrecked.
The 88 car is backed up against the fence, and that was on his own. The 88 of Freitas, he was in turn 12, I think. That's that real tight left-hander just before the start-finish line. We'll get a look at this on the LSR TV replay. He was lapping the 69 of Jonathan Cadell. We were actually live with it at the time, so you saw it unfold. The back end stepped out, and it almost looked like it was a downshift or something had gone wrong, Justin. I wonder if he tried to shift up there and accidentally downshifted because it was really weird how that car just stepped out.
Yeah, I'm listening to this right now, in fact, on the onboard, and that's exactly what I think he did. He ended up going across the bump, which is, mind you, even on the upshift couldn't swing you loose. Downshifted by accident, swung on that bump straight into the wall, and completely killed the engine, having to take the tow truck. Wow. That was at least a top 2 finish for Freenos, and he just had one of his only couple DNFs the entire season.
The thing we say so often about Andrew Freitas is he's just stone cold. He doesn't make mistakes, and of course, when you're driving a stock car, and for all of the drivers here that are using their H-pattern shifter,
trouble, Eberhard.
It's easy to make a mistake like that.
And Eberhard just skipped his way into the tire barrier.
So the 90 from P4 is into the tires. That incident in turn 2, where he got way too far over the curbs. He almost flipped the number 90 car. So we'll get a replay of this one as well. All seemed fine up the hill, and he just turned in a little bit too soon, hit the back side of the curb. His night is done now, as that car has gone to the garage. So 2 of your top 4 gone in a lap.
And that was straight out of the pit lane, mind you. He just had that brake issue. He was having fresh tires and early in the race, and just overran the corner, launched himself off the 2 tires, and couldn't slow himself down because of that. So he completely destroyed his motor, so 2 Aegis cars are out in the span of about 90 seconds.
Those were the other drivers that I was just about to allude to as we tried to get to our midway race break there. You know, the other names in this conversation, the Eberhards and the Joneses, and, you know, these other guys, Kyle Kamer, who was the first to come down to the pit lane. He's your race leader right now in the 8, who leads in that group of the 2 stoppers, who is going to have to come down to the pit lane soon. Freitas stays on track, mind you, so the 88 is still in this race, and I believe he benefited, Justin, from wrecking just before the start-finish line, so his virtual tow time was very short, so he didn't have to sit there for a long time. Eberhard is done, but Freitas is still in this race and miraculously is scored in 6th position. But wow, what a change in just a handful of laps. Now let's get you to the Ford Entertainment Group midway race break as we run now. Kyle Kamer's your race leader at lap number 31, atop Connor Horn in 2nd, 9 seconds behind him. You've also got Scott McClendon in 3rd, Dylan Jones 4th, and Thomas George rounding out a very different looking top 5 at the moment. Andrew Freitas has recovered a P6. In fact, he just passed George. So Freitas to 5th, George down to 6th. Skylar Shackelford runs where he started in P7. Shane Parrish is 8th. Jonathan Cadell's 9th. That makes him the final car on the lead lap. And first car a lap down is going to be Brian Chambliss.
Brian Chambliss is in 11th spot right now. Second car a lap down now, but we'll move to first car. Eric Stanford 12th. Brad Board still chugging along now in 13th position. Well, Todd Nobosad, although he's had a bunch of offs in his Toyota Camry, still 14th. Sean Kalis just came out of the pits, in 15th. Jeremy Rittenberg in 16th. Jeremy E. Miller still chugging along after having to pit early in this race, 3 laps down in 17th. Brett McBride, technical issues off the racetrack, but the rest of the drivers off the circuit. Fredericks DNF due to blown motor. Matt Miller, no front engine cover, off the track, 21st. Blake O'Connell pulled it off the track 9 laps ago, while Jeremy Bazemore DNF'd as the last driver overall 16 laps down.
That's a look top to bottom at your Ford Entertainment Group Midway race break. FEGPC has been serving the iRacing community with custom-built affordable computers specifically built and tuned for iRacing. Your PC will come with everything you need preloaded so you can get racing as soon as it hits your doorstep. Get yours today and join the 600-plus iRacers already enjoying a Ford Entertainment Group computer. PCs to fit every budget from $540 and up. You can go online to www.fegpc.net and mention code LSRTV10 to get your build quoted today. Battle on for third. On the outside comes Dylan Jones in the 03, trying to make it work to the S's. Yes, sir, he's got it. Jones to third. McClendon trickles to fourth, some 50 seconds behind the top two.
Yeah, so a good pass on the outside line. There is that difference in tires. But you might notice in the backdrop, Brad Bohr's day just got worse in 12th position now because he just added extra front end damage on the radiator pan.
That's not going to help his case at all as this race gets into the critical moments where, regardless of what strategy you're on, you're going to be pushing this thing to its absolute limit. We've already seen what that kind of damage can do, front-end damage specifically in a race car. Can blow you up, take you out of the race. In the case of the 4 of Anthony Fredericks, that's the reason why we've got about half a dozen cars behind the wall in a race that really hasn't had a ton of wrecks. I don't think we've really seen any wrecks involving multiple cars, Justin. A couple of times someone's gone around off the nose of another car, but it hasn't been a scrap-filled race. We've seen some good fights, but all in all, pretty happy with what we've seen, and it looked like it was shaping up to be a great strategy race. Kyle Kamer still carrying the torch for the majority of the field, who thinks that 2 stops is the way to go, but Kamer significantly not as fast in comparison to Freitas, I think, and would have had an opportunity to race for, top 3 maybe, no doubt, but if the 8 can pull this off, I'll say I'll be very surprised. Horns closed the gap now to within 2 seconds. He might get him this lap.
Yeah, there is a major difference, of course, with the tires. Kamer, of course, on the 2-stop, early 2-stop, mind you, because he pit on lap 15 coming to lap 16. So he's going to have that major difference and is going to try and have to stretch this even more so laps, it appears, this run. Honestly, I think Horn might be able to get him, but the question's going to be, I think at least, will he still be able to keep off Kamer? Because one of the fastest long-run cars, even faster than Freenosh and Horn, was Kamer for laps 10 through 15.
And that is exactly where the 8 machine kind of has to focus that in on, and it's the moments before and after you make that strategy play that you got to maximize your time. So he does stand to benefit here as well, Justin, to kind of hold Connor Horn up a little bit. I don't think he's going to hold him off for multiple laps. I think he can keep him behind him through the S's probably. I think the pass is going to happen, though, by the time to get down to turn 11. We'll see, but any little bit of time you can squeeze out of the 24 you like, because Connor Horn's going to go to the end of this race. That's the idea. So if that car behind you is not going to pit and you have to pit, you got to be making up that 20 to 30 seconds, and I think that's going to influence his decision here. It's a little bit early, but Horn also comes down pit road, so maybe he was not confident that he'd be able to make it, and a very decisive move as the 24 comes in for a very early second stop and wants to put himself on even ground with the 8 car.
I'm not sure what the strategy call is here. This is an interesting play here. I think Horn might be trying to say, you know what? My biggest competition had a major issue, and the reason I was trying the strategy. So this is, I think, just saying, you know what? I'm going to throw an audible, try and match up with one of the fastest cars left in contention. But you have to factor this in too. Freenosh, he's still running the fastest laps on the racetrack right now after having that incident and having to pull into the tow truck. He only lost a minute. He's now going to be on the 1 stop, essentially, on this race. As the leaders come off the pit lane, Horn comes out first.
That's big for the 24. I still think that Kamer was coming down to react to Horn. I thought Horn had a really good chance to still win this race, but maybe felt like he was going to be threatened maybe decided to hedge his bets, Justin, and say, listen, if I can go head-to-head with this guy, I can beat him, and I think that's true. Again, I think that the speed was probably Horn, Frinage, and then Kamer. So maybe to take the guessing work out of it says, all right, I don't really know if he pits and I don't, and I stick with my strategy if I'm even going to be able to make it on fuel, and if I can, if I'm going to have the tires at the end to hold him off should he catch me. So I think he hedged his bets, called an audible, said let's go head-to-head, and now it's mano-a-mano for the race win here. They're going to have 20 laps to determine this, but I think it'll be decided here in the next 3.
Yeah, this is going to get very dicey here. The thing is, though, Horn is the faster short-run driver. Kamer is the fastest long-run driver out of these machines. The thing is, though, Kamer on the long run was only quicker by a couple tenths. Horn on the short run was faster by up to 2 seconds. So if Horn can pull off and away and not make any mistakes and get through this traffic cleanly as they have one more car to move around, I think he's in a great situation. Not wanting to call this race too early, but he's in the best position to take the checker flag right now.
And he is stretched now. 6 tenths is the advantage over Kamer, and I think I said it would be decided in the next 3. Maybe it was decided that lap because the way that these races tend to play out, they're not really like oval races, Justin, where more times than not maybe there's very clearly cars that are good short run, good long run. It happens. Don't get me wrong. There are some drivers who are going to be better at conserving their tires at a very abrasive, hot racetrack like we're seeing tonight at Sonoma. But I think that speed is just more consistent here, and that consistency kind of rules overall. And if Kyle Kamer was going to have an opportunity, I don't think he was expecting this proposition to show up. He was supposed to be the one on the fresh tires chasing down Connor Horn right now, not Horn on even tires running away from him. I think if Kamer was going to have a shot at this, it would have had to happen on that outlap. That 24, you give him a couple of car lengths, I mean, the chance of him throwing it away is pretty slim. He's been so close to so many times this year to a race win that I think he is locked in, dialed in, looking to get that checkered flag. You never know. We saw Frinage throw one away earlier tonight, but you give that 24 an inch, he'll take a mile, and Connor Horn now starting to run this one out.
Yeah, I said this before. This is Horn's race to lose if he doesn't make mistakes because he's one of the strongest road course drivers from what I've seen in this series, from the experience. It was just a matter of not making mistakes. That was the biggest drawback we've seen in some of the series he's run in on road courses. And we've seen that case now. He's not made any major mistakes. He's not made any mistakes, really, for the most part, other than getting loose a couple times going into the carousel. As long as he keeps the wheel straight and knows that he's now the fastest car on the racetrack, he's in a good situation. The thing is, though, too, he's now got fresher tires, of course, than Frinage, who is going to have to go to the end now. They've already pulled back an extra 3-4 seconds on him since they pulled into the pits.
I think also for the 24, now he has a much better understanding of what this race looks like. Again, if someone's chasing you down on a different strategy, you can look at lap times and you can figure, all right, he's going to fall off a little bit. What do I have to do while saving fuel? Now, well, I was surprised to see the move. And if it didn't work out, and if it still may not work out, it'll certainly be one that the armchair quarterbacks will look on, but I like the move. I gotta say, by Connor Horn, he was able to get the pass right out of the pit lane. That was big, but also now there's no guesswork. He knows that the only car that's got a shot at him is Kyle Kamer, and that car is 1.2 seconds behind me. Don't worry about Dylan Jones. That's 17 seconds. Frinage, 23 seconds. I think it's incredible the 88 is still in this race, let alone the top 5. But Connor Horn knows how hard he has to drive that car. He can back it off a little bit in those places of concern you mentioned, into the carousel where that car's been getting loose. He can see who he needs to stay in front of, and I think the race now is in his own hands.
I think so too at this point, and it was mentioned at least with the Frinage Horn battle that was going on, as well as in real life with Kyle Busch and Martin Truex Jr. Some people were asking, why did you pit a lap later or even a couple laps later? You gave the race away. One of those armchair quarterbacks had a great answer actually to that. Why do the same thing when you know there's going to be a hard chance to try and make the pass? Why not try and do something different to try and see if that can work to give you that advantage? That's what Horn tried to do, and try and do something different to get in front of Freenash and then make sure he can play defense instead of offense and try and fight for this race victory. Now he knew, again, with the different parameters, Kamer, he knew he was about the same pace, if not faster. He knew he can try and pull away at this part of the run if he followed him back in. That's why I think, even though I think he was safe on fuel, he didn't want to try and risk it and say, you know what, why have a chance, put anything for a chance to see if there's a mistake on the one stop.
And just as it is, a simplified strategy for Connor Horn now, it's the same for Kyle Kamer. Kyle Kamer's not guessing, am I going to catch him in time? 30 seconds, 25, 20, kind of matching up with the clock. It's simple. For Connor Horn, that car a second behind you needs to stay behind you. For Kamer, that car a second ahead of you, you got to make up a second. So I think both of these drivers now feel a little bit more comfortable or in control, maybe more so than letting the strategy dictate how this race was going to end. It's up to these two. Whoever's going to drive the faster 16 laps as of the next time by is going to win this race. No ifs and or buts, barring any mistakes or anything crazy that may happen. They also have a few cars to pick off lapped traffic-wise. Skylar Shackelford is one of them. Another driver who has had a lot of good performances this season. 4 top 5 finishes for Shackelford without a win. Not going to come tonight for the driver of the number 12 machine. And as I mentioned, he makes a big mistake in 7. It goes way wide. So I'm going to stop talking about guys because it seems to be a bit of bad luck.
Commentator's curse does that sometimes, but to get back, though, to one more point I want to try and make with this lead, Kyle Kamer, while he hasn't been the fastest on the short run, there's an advantage, though, to being behind Horn. You're able to learn what the driver in front of you is doing by following their tire tracks and seeing where they're braking, what can I do to try and be a little faster than them, and try and learn off of them. It's a lot something you see in practice, let's say, for drivers who might not know the track or the best lines. And Kyle's actually, I think, doing that to where he's now evened up his short and mid-run pace that he didn't have at the start of the race when he was the one having to lead a group of drivers and lost touch of the race leaders because he's trading fastest lap times now back and forth for the 24.
And that kind of puts the ball into Connor Horn's court. I mentioned that he can kind of dictate how hard he wants to drive based off of the gap to Kyle Kamer. If Kamer just stays there breathing down his neck within that ballpark of a second or so, then the 24 can't back off. And maybe he takes a glance into the rearview mirror one too many times and forces him into a mistake. Listen, these drivers, they know how the gamesmanship works. They have done this many a times before. They'll do it many a times after this. They're very familiar with how this plays out. But with 9 cars on the lead lap, this is it. I mean, what you're looking at, there is a battle for third, and it's going to come up, I think, sooner than maybe we would have expected. The faster car between Dylan Jones and Andrew Freenash is the 88. He's still 2 seconds back, but I think he ends up on the podium after this, Johnson, and that'll be quite an interview if that does happen, as he last time by was over a half a second better than the 03 car.
Technically, he's actually got the fresh tires out of that ordeal, too, because he's been running in the 135s the past few laps. Jones is one of the drivers who tried the one-stop strategy in the 03 machine and who had came out at the same time as Eberhard, in fact. So, you got to remember, too, they're their teammates, so I don't think they're going to race too hard for this position. I think he knows that Freenash is trying to recover as many points as he can. I think if he catches up to him, in fact, when he catches up to him, I should rather say, I think Jones is just going to say, you reel me in for about 5-10 seconds back, just go.
Hey, get out and take care of business for these guys, and we'll see if that is how this exchange is going to play out. In fact, it may happen this lap with that kind of light blue number 88. I mentioned looks like a throwback paint scheme on Freenash's car this week. We've seen him sport a couple of different looks in 2019, and maybe one of the better looking ones we've seen. It is a nice throwback ride for him this week around, and I agree with you. I think Jones knows he's not going to be able to hold him off for 14 laps, and I think he's going to be able to, to realize that. And Freenage will get here and get the spot, but that was a big slide down and into the S's. The carousel. That was turn 4. Got a little bit squirrely. Like I said, I'm just going to stop talking about everybody.
I think he just hit the gas too hard, and that's easy to do because a lot of the drivers, again, are shifting to first gear if they're comfortable with it to try and get some extra revs and RPMs and speed to send in towards the carousel. And that was the case, I think, where he just hit the gas too hard, and you got to remember he's probably pushing like a stabbed rat, so to speak, to try and gain as much time and positions back to try and make up for the mistake, knowing he had a chance for the race to win. Now, the most he can try and hope for is third.
And keep in mind also, I mean, that car's got damage after that spin. He hit the wall, backed into the wall. I think all things considered, it looks pretty good compared to, maybe how that would have ended, especially because that front straightaway's got, concrete wall on one side, concrete wall on the other side, and it was a little bit of a blind corner. Freenage could have easily gotten wiped out by somebody else coming through, could have ruined his night, could have ruined somebody else's. So, as mentioned, I think he's very happy to be in the position that he's in, and maybe that's why the car is also having those snappy moments. He did back it into a wall on the front straightaway while being your race leader in this one. So maybe give him a lap or two, a grace period. Maybe that spooked him a little bit. He'll take it easier. Here's the corner. It was right there, turn 4. He got off much further onto the curbs last time and much more in control this time through.
Yeah, you mentioned a bit of the damage there. I think he got maybe some type of engine damage. It's not as big of a factor except into the hard braking zones and passing zones to try and lose those RPMs and top end speed. The main concern is, say, did he damage the suspension? How is it affecting his braking? How is it affecting how the car is turning? Because lately, his brakes has started to actually lock up a little bit more as the tire wear has started to kick in. So it's a lot of questions that you have to ask yourself after an incident like that to see, okay, how do I have to adjust to be able to hit the same marks in line and try and at least salvage some of the time that I might have lost?
Another hard dive down into turn 11 for Freenage, and this may be the lap coming up. There is other cars in and around this group. Cadell's just ahead of them. They also just got through Brian Chambliss, who was pretty good at getting out of the way and letting them deal with their business. You're not missing anything up front. It is still Connor Horn by a little bit more, 1.3 seconds, the difference between first and second. This battle for third is the closest on the racetrack at the moment, and it's bookended by lap traffic in front and behind him.
Yeah, I don't think the traffic's going to play a factor. The thing is, though, will Freenage be able to catch up to Jones? Because he's actually just about evened out in terms of his tire fall off, I think. That could be a potential sign you see on some of the road courses, and more so on the oval track. And now he's getting to where he's struggling off these corners and bobbling around and really starting to get near snappy, trying matching the exits. It might be tough for Freenage to try and make this pass now because he might have overused his tires trying to even catch up to the 03.
Yeah, and I was wondering, it's not like Dylan Jones has just, picked up a ton of speed. It's not like he was sandbagging by any means. I mean, his lap times have kind of consistently trailed off, as you would expect. But that lap that Freenage got really close to striking distance before he made the mistake, it was a very bad lap. Dylan Jones, in his own right, made some mistakes. He was about 7/10 slower than normal. So this is kind of more so his actual pace as he kind of slides a little bit through turn 11. So these cars aren't that far apart speed-wise than maybe what I was led to believe, Justin, what we were led to believe when we kind of first zoned in on this pass to happen, because it was a bad lap for Jones and a great lap for Freenage at the time. I still think that it's going to go to the 88 before this race is done, but maybe a much more compelling exchange than what we were led to believe.
Yeah, once again, he got within the draft, essentially, and some of the dirty air on top of that. That could be a potential factor on top of that. But Freenosh is now starting to get a couple good laps together to be able to keep up now within 3-4 car lengths of Jones. So I think if he just tries to be patient, he can do something here. By the way, McClendon has now just pit for his final scheduled stop about a couple laps early.
Yeah, so the 51 machine down and into the pit lane. McClendon last time that he came down for service was at lap number 25.
Hold on, so he just topped off for fuel. He didn't even take tires here.
Yeah, he was one of the drivers, I think, that wanted to do the one-stopper, but ended up about 3 laps short on that run alone and figured there was just no way that he was going to be able to get to the end. So that's how you minimize the damage a little bit, is you go fuel only. Problem is, Justin, the whole benefit of the two-stop, aside from, you know, the black and white, do you need that much fuel or do you not? And in this case, he did. He needed 2 stops. But he kind of put himself at a back foot, I think, trying the one-stop. And the whole point of doing that is, you know, to minimize time on pit road. The idea with the two-stop is you're on pit road for more, but you get fresh tires. So I get the idea of you screwed up, you don't want to sit on pit road, but the whole point of pitting twice is so that you got tires, and you didn't get tires, so I'm not sure what he's going to get out of this. If you can maintain, it's all good, and it would be en route to a P5. I think maybe that's the only concern for him, considering he was about a half a second behind all the cars in front of him. Could very well have been the right decision.
If he took tires along with the fuel, the thing is, though, Evan, he would have been somewhere around the back end of the top 10 and would have lost a ton of time, and I don't know if he would have gained it all back. I think that was the thought process. Just take the fuel, risk running on the old tires, and just chug along, because really the pace that he was running on those older tires was within a second of Thomas J. George, and actually 3 seconds quicker last time by than Shane Parrish. So he could potentially still get a top 5 out of this as long as they don't pick up the time, because I think he's still in great shape, actually, to get this top 5.
And that's where he was. The difference between he and Shane Parrish now is 7 seconds. Parrish is the next car behind him. So if McClendon does take 4 tires, he's probably behind Shane. He's probably behind Thomas George as well. I still think, though, he's going to have better tires. He'd pass them anyways, so I don't think it made a ton of difference. But McClendon should be able to hold P5, and not bad at all as that pass for third finally comes as Andrew Freenosh gets the job done. It was a big dive down and into turn 11, and Dylan Jones kind of looked like he let him go.
Yeah, he was slow through the S's, then messed up on the exit of turn 10, and I think he just said, you know what, I've had enough of this battle. Just let by his teammate, knowing that he's had a rough day, and just let him go on and get some more of the points on the table to try and recover, because for Freenosh, it's going to be a recovery to get to a podium position, a third-place finish, as long as he doesn't make any more mistakes. And that's, I think, the most he's going to be able to get unless something crazy happens in this race, not to jinx it.
And this is a race, again, where someone's expectations probably more so realistic than at other tracks. At some racetracks, all that, you know, determines your fate is when a yellow comes out and how a restart goes, what lane you're on a restart. This is pretty much all you. So for the drivers who get the top 5, I think that's kind of the mindset of, you know, we did what we were supposed to do. I think you find the drivers who were happy to get what they got, kind of 10th through 15th. And it sounds silly. Why would the guys 10th through 15th be more happy than the guys up front? They're not getting as many points. It's true. But the top 5 guys come into this race, Justin, knowing I am a good road course racer, more so than maybe most of the field. I need to come in here and perform. Guys a little bit closer to the back, kind of the mid-pack range, are the guys that show up, off this one out, gain some spots from cars wrecking out of the race, gain some spots from them keeping themselves clean, and, you know, they aren't the names that, you know, we're going to have the opportunity to chat with post-race, and, you know, the points aren't going to be the big splash in the plus or minus tonight, but, you know, you look at those names, the Rittenbergs, who we've already mentioned, somebody like a Brad Bohr and Novosad. If these guys end up racing for a championship this year and they could make something happen down there towards 16th in the points, tonight could be a big reason why. And I don't want that to kind of get overlooked in all of this.
Yeah, absolutely huge reason why they'll be able to. It comes down to every single point matters. We've seen it in real life play out many times. We're going to see it potentially this season. there's a lot of drivers that are still on that bubble to be able to even make it into the postseason. As long as you keep the car alive, if you struggle with road courses, you can have a good solid points day. 15 drivers are still running on this racetrack right now that are in that case where they can say, I survived, I was able to get as many points as I can and take advantage of the drivers who crashed out or couldn't make it around this course today. Or, and better yet, who didn't try and even test their skills.
That's right. I mean, you look at the points coming into this season, or into tonight, I guess I should say. 48 drivers have competed in races this season, and we're used to seeing 30 or so per night. 22 made the start this evening, so that's maybe a half a dozen or 10 or so that didn't make the start, and they may feel, listen, I'm no good. I don't want to go out there and embarrass myself and sweat and, deal with this for an hour and a half, an hour 45 minutes. But if you miss out by 10 points, 5 points, this is the night that you'll look back on. And we see the same kind of thing, Justin, when it comes to plate races. Some drivers skip out on the plate races. Oh, Eric Stanford, the 19 just crashed. 11th position, Eric Stanford wiped out into the S's. It was the first right-hander. He got out of shape, could not rein it back in. Hard hit into the tires. Very fortunate for him, though, if we can get a second look, that he didn't get stuck in the tires like what happened to Eberhardt, and he'll continue on, and I don't even think he's going to lose the spot.
Yeah, and he's electing to stay on the racetrack with under 10 laps to go, but he's been flirting with disaster all night. So many times he's gone off the course, or gone sideways, it seems, in that 11th position, but it looked like a case where tried to run in second gear, over top the hill, over-rev the engine before he can get the shift in, and just hook straight to the right. But again, there's so many chances where if you hook into those tires, you're not able to even move. Your race is basically done because you have to take a tow truck. That same thing can happen too, by the way, with the hairpin tires on that right side, if there's, say, a pass going on there that we've seen come into play in E-Speed.
Certainly, all of these things are things, I should say, that drivers got to be prepared for. You got to be up at a wheel for, and maybe as we have, in the last 10 laps or so, Justin, not as many battles on track as I think most of these positions have been spoken for. Now to this juncture, you start to talk about the race overall, and you kind of, I don't want to say we're reflecting on the race. You still got 6 laps to go, but it's easy for the drivers to get into the same boat. Listen, your car's probably the worst it's been all night. Your damage is probably the worst it's been all night, and you start to lose that little bit of mental focus, that sharpness, end up in the tires just like that. I mean, most places on the track here, from the edge of the asphalt to the wall or to the tires, is maybe 10 feet at best. So a small, you can't make the mistake. The carousel is somewhat forgiving here. You end up in the tires, you got some runoff. As we take a look at the 12 of Skylar Shackelford here, he's just now coming out of the carousel as well, and he's kind of having trouble keeping it together. It's very easy to lose focus, and maybe the 12 car caught sleeping there. He'll go wide and let the 88 to get on through, and he'll stay wide, let Dylan Jones keep on him as well, because the 03 doesn't think this battle for third is over. He wants to bring this one down to the wire.
I think he's saying, at least with Dylan Jones, why not try and keep this battle up and see what I can try and do, even with the little bit of tire advantage for the 88. But to get to Shackelford in that point, I want to bring this up again as you were trying to discuss that there in terms of mistakes snowballing. Shackelford's kind of that result. He's gone off the carousel twice in 2 laps now, has damage on the right side of the car that might be affecting it on the fender where he's trying to turn very hard to get into the corners and overrunning them. It's to the point where, say you have a big advantage for position like he does now, how to 10th, it's like, you know what, I'm going to run these laps as softly as I can. Maybe, yes, lose a couple seconds a lap, but there's a big enough cushion for him, I think, to be able to get this job done to hold on to 9th position. And that's why I think, at least if I was him, I'd say, let's just make it to the finish, don't overcook the car. Or else you'll be like Eric Stanford, who I believe just slowed down and lost even more time.
And that's the thing, if the consequences aren't there, if you've got 20 seconds, to the next car, then maybe you don't care if you take a corner a little wide, and hey, that might be the right idea. If I can't give up that much time, the only way I'm going to throw away 20 seconds is if I'm pushing this car and I wreck it. No need. Take it easy, and, end of the race, you got your spot hung on to. As long as you don't throw it away, I guess, take whatever means necessary to close this one out. It is going to be a very different kind of race when we catch you next time. I mentioned off at the top that it is another swing of races here coming off of last week's off race. We'll be back at it July 1st next Monday night for the Chicagoland Speedway. Of course, Chicagoland Speedway in action here on the iRacing Esports Network tomorrow night with the eDascar Pagana Freeze iRacing Series. That's at 9 Eastern start. All of our races Monday nights also 9 o'clock Eastern starts. Chicago, though, July the 1st. The weekend after that, Justin, we head to Daytona International Speedway on July the 8th and then to Kentucky on the 15th before we get our next off week. So 2 intermediates and another super speedway on deck would be our 3rd plate race of the season in 16 weeks.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough swing of races, to say the very least, because I think Chicagoland's going to be potentially crazy. The mile and a halves have all been crazy this season. In the most case, in a lot of races in real life, as well as especially in iRacing. But I kind of want to put a circle around that race at Daytona, because we've seen how the package is at Talladega. It's going to be interesting at Daytona, as Jones just threw away a potential 3rd position.
Yeah, the 03 machine had been putting the pressure on him, and I think overstepped it a little bit, trying to work that race car more so than what it had. He was coming down into the carousel, and looked like that was just an issue under braking. A lot of the mistakes that we've seen there have been actually by the time they got up and onto the curbs, and that was him just maybe a little bit of an early downshift. The revs weren't quite there, and that car broke sideways. He did a very good job of hanging on, all while being overtaken by lapped car Todd Novosad, who is en route to a 15th place result. That's the kind of guy I'm talking about, Justin, who's going to be very happy with the result. Started 23rd. He'll get a 15th if he can hang on. In front of him, Jeremy Rittenberg started 21st. He'll get 14th if he can hang on. But Novosad and Jones both did a good job there, sneaking by each other. That could have ended up with a couple of cars torn up, and that's what I mean. Stay focused to the end. 4 laps to go for your race leader.
Also give a shout out, I think you can, if we can go on board, to Brad Bohr, because even with no front bumper, with the radiator already skewed to the left because of a second incident, no hood on the race car, and a completely crumpled up machine with multiple areas of damage, he's been able to survive around the racetrack, and he's in position to finish in 12th spot. K-List is at least 3/4 of a track behind him, so despite crashing a couple times, he's going to have a decent points day in that 48 machine.
Yeah, I thought he was somebody else in the boat of, Friedage and some of the other guys, where that was a wreck that I would not have all been surprised if that was their race and they were done. But kudos to him for the modified, sticking it out, no front clip at all. And my concern would have been the engine on that and overheating oil temps, but credit to him. I guess there's a lot of airflow to the radiator. There's no clip on the front of it, but he's all right in P12. Again, that's still up from where he started.
Should note, when it comes to the tape, however, it's going to sound weird, but it still can factor in potentially, depending on how the damage is, just because essentially it's like the tape is on the opening of the grill, even without the front clip. It's hard to explain, but for the most part, though, it's not, because of how the fixed setup is tape-wise, only 25%, it's not a major worry when it comes to losing that front end like that, to have that risk. If say you had an open race where you might have drivers push it up to 35%, I think that's where you would panic.
Race leader now working lap number 53, Connor Horn, getting to crunch time in this one, Justin. The last time we saw a first-time race winner this season in a points race was back on Monday, April the 29th at Talladega Superspeedway. That race won by Todd Novosad. Since then, Jonathan Cadell won his 2nd of the year at Dover. Andrew Freitas won his 5th and 6th of the year. Charlotte, then Pocono, and Jason Jacoby 2 weeks ago at Michigan with his 3rd of the year. Now, there is one name in the middle there, and that is Connor Horn. He won the All-Star race at Charlotte, middle of May. but it was not a points race, and that's why the stats for him still say 0 race wins on 2019. He is one of the drivers who has come into this series we have been impressed with, has had not only good races and good opportunities to win, but great races and great opportunities. Probably at least 1 or 2 that he should have won. And tonight maybe he puts the demons to rest as he's got popsicle sticks in the air.
And he just recorded a time half a second quicker than man on the screen, in fact, and Kyle Kamer. You have to give a shout out again to Kamer, though, because Kamer has had a rough bunch of races sometimes this season. It's been good to see him, however, be able to have a good, strong run. He's 3rd in the point standings, in fact, despite only 3 top 5s, the lowest inside the top 5 in the grouping. And in the past few races, mind you, he's had some bumps. He's been able to barely get into the top 10, has had to try and fight for as many bonus points as he can by leading laps, and in turn, has not usually been up towards a position like this to try and win. It's been a strong, consistent performance today because Kamer, he doesn't have any type of damage, it looks like, on that number 8 SK Sim Racing machine, and he's been able to keep that car clean. Wouldn't be surprised if he has one of the lowest incident point totals of the day today.
That's the key, is, running your own race, minimizing. I thought about saying eliminating the mistakes, Justin, but I feel like nobody goes mistake-free, and a mistake might not necessarily mean, an off-track or an incident point or fencing it, but I think as race car drivers, you're competitive. White flag in the air one more time around for Connor Horn to feel like, if I just miss a corner a little bit, that's a mistake. So minimizing those mistakes has been crucial. But I'm going to look back on it, and we've talked about a couple of the guys who have had rough nights, toughed it out. That was a gutsy move by Connor Horn to not only try the one-stopper, but when he saw Kyle Kamer prepare to come down to the pit lane to offset the strategy, to say, listen, I can beat this guy head-to-head. And that was a gutsy call, and he's half a lap away from a win.
And knowing on top of that, how much the driver he was racing against changed because of what happened to Andrew Freenage, I think it took some weight off his shoulders because he said it after winning the All-Star race. Freenage wasn't here, really the factor part of how he was able to win that race. And he's been basically the main deterrent to why Horn has not found victory lane yet. But Horn able to have the best strategy, able to have the most consistent laps, and the big one, not crash when up in the front. This is going to be a big day, I think, for the driver of the Speedway Chevrolet tonight.
Long time coming. Like we said, he had the All-Star win a couple of weeks ago, but he wants the points for the race win. He has been so close so many times this season, and he's finally going to be able to do it. Final time into the hairpin for the driver of the number 24 Speedway Chevrolet. It is his first win as he starts celebrating already in the Full Throttle RealSimRacing Cup Series. Sonoma belongs to Connor Horn.
And a fantastic job tonight by Connor Horn once again. Had one of the fastest cars all night long. Actually was the same pace on Freenage. But again, he was able to keep the car clean and hit the strategies right on the money to be able to battle who he was racing for this victory. A big-time victory for Connor Horn tonight.
Speeds to the race win. And in a road course race that we thought we had a pretty good idea of what we were going to see over the course of the night, somewhat early on in this one. Some curveballs, a couple of top 5 wrecked race cars later, and a pit strategy audible call on the final trip down. Connor Horn gets his first win on a Monday night. Well-deserved for him, and in what I would consider somewhat relatively convincing fashion when you consider it all, Justin.
Yeah, only 4 cars on the lead lap at the time of the checker flag. In fact, Jones, the last of those drivers, he just dominated the field tonight. He was as much as 4 or 5 seconds quicker a lap than a majority of the field at the checker flag. Despite the celebration, he just had the pace. He was able to have the second fastest car. In fact, the fastest car up in front of Freenage, even when he was battling him. And it was enough to be able to take the checker flag, I think, tonight.
He has got some celebrating to do, no doubt, and because of that late pitch strategy decision, he's got enough fuel to come around and get some burnouts as he kicks it out in turn 10, heads back down to the close end of the racetrack by the pits, and there you go. He'll send it around turn 11 with a little bit of style. Connor Horn is your race winner tonight from the virtual Sonoma Raceway. His teammate is there to say congrats. And there are the long-awaited burnouts for the driver of the number 24 machine. What we'll do is take a quick opportunity to step aside, and when we come back, I'm sure it'll be an excited driver waiting for us down at RealSimRacing Victory Lane. You're watching LSR TV's coverage of the Full Throttle RealSimRacing Cup Series powered by Sim Racers for Mental Health. Post-race action still to come on the iRacing Esports Network.
The most realistic online racing sim ever made. This is iRacing. Detailed laser scan tracks, fully dynamic real-world cars, and over 50 series to choose from. 6 online world championships offering over $100,000 in annual prizes. This is the original esport racing game. This is iRacing.
This broadcast is the copyrighted work of LSR TV, and it may not be rebroadcast, retranslated, or used in any form without the express written consent of Live Sim Racing LLC and iRacing.com Motorsport Simulations. LSR TV would like to thank you for your support, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. And back live from the virtual Sonoma Raceway, where LSR TV's continuing coverage of the 2019 Full Throttle RealSimRacing Cup Series powered by Sim Racers for Mental Health continue tonight with round 14 in the Sonoma 55 as we welcome you back into the LSR TV booth. Evan Pasoko, Justin Prince upstairs with you. We will go trackside and take a look at tonight's LSR TV full race results. It's presented by Ford Entertainment Group. FEGPC has been serving the iRacing community with custom-built affordable computers specifically built and tuned for iRacing. Your PC will come with everything you need preloaded so you can get racing as soon as it hits your doorstep. Get yours today and join the 600-plus iRacers already enjoying a Ford Entertainment Group build. PCs to fit every budget from $540 plus. You can visit fegpc.net and mention code LSRTV10 to get your build quoted today. Your race winner is Connor Horn. Takes it by 7.9 seconds with Andrew Freinage in third. They'll all be trackside with us in just a moment. Dylan Jones rounded out your lead lappers in P4. Scott McClendon lap down ends up exactly where he started in fifth. Thomas George with a good result in P6. Shane Parrish was seventh. Jonathan Cadell in eighth. Ninth position belonging to Skylar Shackelford, and Brian Chambliss rounds out your top 10.
Eric Stanford came away 11th spot, 2 laps down, the first car in that bracket, followed by Brad Bohr, who came away 2 laps down as well. Jeffrey Benenberg finished 13th, 3 laps down with Sean Kalis and Todd Nobasad. With the rest of the field, DNFs, Jeremy E. Miller, Daniel Eberhardt, Rhett McBride, Anthony Fredericks, Matt Miller, Blake O'Connell, and Jeremy Bazemore, all finishing the race inside the garage area with their destroyed race cars, technical issues, or essentially a start and park situation to try and gain some points in this race.
That was a look top to bottom at your Ford Entertainment Group full race results. Let's go trackside now. Catch up with the driver of the number 24 machine. At long last, Connor Horn is a winner in the Full Throttle RealSimRacing Cup Series. We're with him now. Connor, I know the All-Star race win had to feel good, but you finally get the stamp, the one that comes with all of the points, and it was quite an exciting night tonight from Sonoma. Congratulations.
Thank you. You can probably see the excitement with me trying to drift all the way around the track. I think the first lap, the start of the race, I think was very important because I was able to get the right line to be able to pass Andrew, and Dylan had a couple problems on the initial lap, and I was able to get by Andrew and be able to lead him once again, which I've done a couple times this year. And I didn't know what strategy he was gonna pull. I had a feeling I was gonna do the one stop most of the way, and he would probably try something different, which he did. I think I made the fuel last long enough on the first run where I would have been able to make it last on a one stop, and then when Andrew had his problem and he reset, I was like, I don't know, it was like a whole different ball game. Instead of being focused on the one stop, I just had to focus on catching Kyle as fast as possible and pitting with him at all costs. And I pit with him, and I got a great stop, and I was able to hold him off and pull away.
And that decision kind of came as a surprise to us because we also thought that, you pretty much hit your fuel number and you were going to be able to do this on the one stopper. Was it a decision, to pit with him there? Was that kind of premeditated? Did you think that was going to be the call if you were in that position, or was it more so a spur of the moment type move?
Yeah, like I said, if Andrew didn't have his problems, I was doing the one stop the whole way. I wasn't really worried about Kyle otherwise because me and Andrew were pretty far ahead. But yeah, when Andrew had his problem, I had a feeling that I was going to have to change strategies. I didn't feel like it was worth it to risk the one stop and running out of fuel. So I just decided to get on Kyle's pit strategy, and it worked out nicely.
These road course wins are not easy to come by. They, for the longest time over the course of the years here with RealSimRacing have been dominated by a handful of drivers. So to be able to come in and not only take it right to the guys like the Andrews and whatnot from the get-go, but to close this one out and for it to be the first official trip for you to Victory Lane, how special does this make it for you?
It's awesome. I didn't expect it to be at a road course, but I've been trying to get better at the road courses to try to do other things, and I think it's paying off a little bit. I think I ran the best. That was probably one of the best races in general that I've ever run. It was just, I've really surprised myself, and I'm happy as ever about it.
I'm sure there are many good results to come this season, and especially as you continue to improve on a week-by-week basis, not just you, but the team as well. But for tonight, at least, the sponsors, the shout-outs, all those good folks who makes it happen for you in the 24.
Yeah, we got Speedway. I'm trying to remember everyone. We got Speedway. We got Hammer Bowling. We got, was it NZXT? I'm sorry if I forget anyone. We got Menards Racing on board. Everyone who's with us, gotta appreciate all of them. Gotta appreciate, obviously, Skylar and Jeremy. They were really considerate when they were letting me by, and that was great. And I had another friend who was trying to help me out with strategy after what happened with Andrew, and he was really helpful, kind of made the decision with me, and it ended up working out. So shout out to everyone involved.
A team effort certainly to get you to the racetrack, but once they stick you out on it, it comes down to can you execute. And tonight you certainly did. Probably shouldn't have taken this long, but you finally get that W in the column. Connor, congratulations on the win. Thanks for giving us your time, and maybe we'll make a routine out of this. We'll catch you next week.
I'm hoping so. Y'all have a good night.
Winner tonight from Sonoma Raceway, Connor Horn, taking a checkered flag to the tune of 7.962 seconds. Over this next driver, Kyle Kamer, kind of played a bigger role than you might have thought. First driver to kick off the two-stop strategy and was there till the dying laps. Ends up second. He's trackside with Justin.
Thank you very much, Evan. Kyle Kamer now with me here. Kyle, you had a strong car, it looks like, most of the night, but not towards the end of the race. Talk us through what happened essentially as the race progressed, and especially being essentially a top 5, top 10 car all night.
Yeah, basically we were not good enough on the long runs. That's kind of the way it worked out, and I knew that coming into that last pit stop, um, Connor beating me off of pit road killed me because I thought if I could get out ahead of him, I could get a little bit of a gap, and then by the time he caught me, maybe the tires would level off a little bit enough that I could at least keep him behind me for the rest of the race. But when he beat me off of pit road, um, at that point, I was just going as hard as I could. I knew I had to pass him within that first 5 or 6 laps, or I wasn't going to have a chance. Um, Once we got 20, 25 laps into that run.
You mentioned a little bit, of course, that long run pace. What did you feel like you needed to take to try and make sure you had that long run longevity compared to Connor Horn or Andrew Freenage? Because we were looking at some of the times, actually, in the first 10, 15 laps. You were actually quicker than them before your first pit stop. What do you feel needed to take to try and get that long run speed compared to those two?
Yeah, I think I killed the rear tires on drive off on that last run, just trying so hard to get around him on when we come off a pit road. So by the end of the last 10 laps there, I had no rear tires, so I had no drive off.
Had a feeling that was the potential possibility with that. One thing I do want to ask, of course, this is one of the 3 road courses of the season, of course, Watkins Glen, the next one in a few weeks. What's your approach? What is different in your approach for a road course race compared to, say, how you might try and prepare and strategize for an oval event?
Well, the great thing about the road course races is there's pretty much never going to be a yellow flag. So it allows you to sort of plan out a strategy before the race even starts. So if you can put in the time and figure out, fuel saving versus, driving it hard and that kind of stuff, I think strategy is the biggest difference, that you can actually have a plan going into a race, and, as long as you don't have any trouble on the track, that you can run that out.
Next race is coming up at Chicagoland. What are your thoughts about going back to the craziness that is a 1.5-mile circuit with this package?
Well, I had a strong start to the season, and then the last 3 or 4 weeks really fell off. So getting this second place finish gets my confidence back up here, and I'm looking forward to go back there and see what we can do.
Is there anyone you want to thank before we let you go here tonight, Kyle?
Yeah, I got to thank SK Sim Racing, Sean Kalis, for putting his name on the car for this season. Box Crush, they do web development and digital marketing, and Interstate Batteries, all battery center in Charlotte, North Carolina, Concord, North Carolina, and Sandusky, Ohio. And I just want to give a big shout out to my cousin Steven. He's fallen into some tough times, and we're praying for you, Steven, and we're right here by your side, buddy.
We hope Steven will be okay. Thank you very much again for the time, Kyle.
Yep, thank you, Justin.
Thank you very much. That's Kyle Kamer, who came away in second position tonight. Evan, back to you.
And we'll slide on down to a driver who, all things considered, P3 on the podium, not that bad. For the driver of the 88, it is Andrew Freenage. But Andrew, I know that this is not where you wanted to be sitting, and certainly not where you expected to be sitting after the way that the first third of this race started, and then it all went wrong. Well, leading this race, just tell us about it.
Yeah, this is probably the first race all year I've really, really looked forward to since this package. It was loose, it was fun to drive, and put a lot of practice in, felt confident. I screwed up my qualifying lap, which kind of put us behind Connor there. We were just biding our time doing it, and let me tell you the story what happened on the front stretch. I had just gotten each pattern shifter today. I usually run paddles, and I felt decent in practice. I only blew it up once with short shifting, and I decided to go with it. Went from second to first on the front stretch. I thought I blew the motor, so I went and towed. And I'm sitting in the frickin' right at the start line. That ain't fair to everybody coming off that corner. So I thought I blew the motor. I towed it and got back out there. It didn't. Motor was fine. So truthfully, I wish I could have started it back up. I had the thing stalled. So that's kind of what happened there. But I mean, it was a ton of fun still, and I'm extremely happy with the third place after everything considered there.
Aside from that, one of the, at least what looked like was going to be one of the big talking points for you, and it continued throughout, was the pit strategy. You, Connor Horn, going head-to-head. He was primed for the one-stop strategy. You were on the two-stop, and Connor eventually changed his strategy once you dropped out, and it became he and the Kyle Kamer show. But just tell us about that decision to go for the two stops and how you think it would have worked out between you two, because approaching that halfway point, you two were almost on top of each other. It looked like from our end that if it got to play through, it would have been very exciting.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know which would have done it. He was quick tonight, and me and Kyle did a lot of testing with two stops versus one stop. I think with ours, it was probably 4 seconds better doing the two stops. I know it was within 3 seconds when he pitted, so it definitely would have been really, really interesting to see. I would have had about 8 laps fresher tires, and I think my strategy would have been good. I'm not going to say I would have won because he was fast, and congrats to him, too. I know he's been trying forever to get a win, and he finally did it, and he really earned this one. This was a hard track to drive, and congrats to him as well.
So I know that it makes life easier to regroup from one that gets away like it did tonight when you've had the season that you've had, the last couple seasons that you've had, and the fact that you're well out in front of the points, you're kind of just buying time to the playoffs. So is there anything left to learn with this car and these new rules as we head back to the intermediates and take on Chicago next week?
To be honest, I got a lot to learn. I know I say it every week, but I really don't have this car figured out with this package. The draft is so big, you can't drive away. You can save tires and catch a guy, and you just don't have enough horsepower to pass him. I'm not a fan of it, but it is what it is. And iRacing put out 2 good setups the last few weeks. Michigan was loose, and this track, I think it might have been the track, but it was loose as well. So my hopes are high that Chicago will be loose as well. It will be, the drivers can put their throttle inputs and brake inputs, and we're not just flooring it the whole way around. So hopefully iRacing does that, and then I can learn how to drive a loose car again. But yeah, I mean, it's just kind of what I want to do is lock ourselves into the playoffs, which I know we have a big points lead, but I ain't taking that for granted. A lot of things can happen, and just lock ourselves in and move on from there.
We always appreciate the time, but inside Andrew, again, congratulations on being able to come back and still end up on the podium in this one. Kind of a real testament to what you guys had tonight. We'll catch you at Chicagoland, and we'll see what the 88's got for us.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Came home third tonight. That is Andrew Friedeyes. Big thanks, as always, our top 3, Connor Horn, Kyle Kamer, and Andrew for giving us some time post-race. And our first of, as you mentioned, Justin, 3 road course races this season heads into our rearview mirror with still the Glen and the Roval to come later on this season. But we get back to our regularly scheduled programming, per se, with a couple of ovals coming up for the next few weeks.
Yeah, Chicagoland, I think, is going to be crazy. Still have to feel that out personally myself, but I think it's going to be a pretty interesting one because it's a little bit of a more rougher track surface compared to some of the mile and a half in that shape we've gone to so far this year. But I think it might be somewhere in the realm of Kansas. I'm curious to see how it's going to work out. I'm also curious how the new restrictor plate version of the package is going to work out at Daytona because it was crazy at Talladega, both in real life and even more so, actually, I think, in iRacing. I think that's going to be one of the most hectic races we might see until the postseason. It's going to be a white knuckle next couple weeks, to say the very least, on the schedule.
We certainly hope that you join us then. Until next time, though, that'll do it for us here tonight from Sonoma, as we put now 14 races on this 2019 campaign behind us. As always, we want to give a call to everybody behind the scenes at LSR TV, the people who are here on a weekly basis for making these possible, and for your broadcast team tonight. So for myself, Evan Pasoko, for Justin Prince, and our producer, Brett Wheeler, want to thank you for tuning in, and congratulations to Connor Horn, finally a winner for 2019 on a Monday night. We'll be set to return, as mentioned, next Monday night. It's July the 1st from the Chicagoland Speedway. It's at 9 Eastern. Start that race and every race as we continue on this 2019 RealSimRacing Cup Series campaign. Going to be found right here on LSR TV and the iRacing Esports Network. Until then, though, good night from Wine Country.